is visibility and having the right presentation of what you're selling to people. Are you presenting things in the right way? Are you properly staging on your listing? Does it look good? Do people want to buy it? Can they see themselves there? Is your product that unique? How visible are you in front of people? And that's the front end of things that help get people past objections of, oh, we're going to beat you to the punch. We already know that you're going to say this about this. So we have to get to those selling points and objections as quickly as possible so that people don't go back to the page.
Action Insights.
Hey, welcome back to Action Insights. Today, I'm so stoked to have on Michael Maher. He is the Chief Idea Officer of Cartology. And today we're going to be talking about profit-focused growth, which I'm really excited to get into this subject, especially from someone who does full service. So Michael runs a full service agency dedicated to helping Amazon sellers grow. And when we're talking about profits, I mean, that's on everyone's minds these days. And so I'm really excited to get into this with you.
Thanks for having me. It's weird being a guest, but yeah, I'm excited to be here. And I think it's not as sexy as sales, but I think 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure, all those types of indicators of what kind of agency you are, who you serve. It's the beauty industry. Like, it's very alluring. People want to attain and be a part of, I think, a visual component to it. Even with that, the numbers component, like seeing commas. I'm a big R&D junkie. I mean, there's a lot of people who talk about, like, there's so many commas in my check. Like, you know, I've got so many commas. I'm so rich. Right, exactly. Or commas in the bank. The profitability piece, that's ultimately what business will stick around for 5, 10 years. And I'll get more into even how that plays in our business model. But like, I selfishly want you to stick around as a business because I want you to keep paying me to help grow your business. And I want you to be successful because I want to be successful. And if you aren't profitable, you're only going to be our customer for so long or our client for so long. And I want you to stick around. And that's also a success story for us. It's like when people say, oh, it's not about the money, like, oh, it's definitely about the money, but I also want you to care about your success too.
Yeah, we're going to dive into that really deeply, but I'd love to quickly allow you to give like a little bit of a backstory, Cartology, your agency, how you all got started.
So Cartology was started about 6 years ago, and I had been previously to that, I had my own e-commerce business that I ran for 6 years and learned a lot during that time. I cut my teeth on e-commerce in general, but was really focused on marketplace sales. I launched my business selling on eBay, which seems crazy now, knowing how big Amazon is, and that was back in 2010. As soon as I was working a full-time job that I hated and I just wanted to get out of it. As a musician, I was selling used music equipment on there. Sometimes I would buy something at a pawn shop, fix it. There might be a small modification that needed to be made and then I'd sell it. But I knew someone who was doing that for his job. And I'm like, dude, you need to teach me what's going on. Like, I hate the job that I'm at right now. I want something different and I understand the concept. So teach me the business side of it. Such a great dude, advisor, and someone that's been helpful in my business. And he's still running his own e-commerce business and lives in my same city, which is cool. He showed me the ropes and I did the traditional go to a trade show, buy product, start selling that. And I sold some generic product for a while. I got into it selling like fashion watches and cell phone cases and just really kind of funny things. All over the place and kind of morphed into more like sporting goods, fitness type stuff. And developed some of my own product lines. Never really went private label per se. I started to develop a brand because I believed in the power that a brand could have. The one brand that I had was mildly successful. But in 2016, that business crashed. And I really quickly had to say, what am I going to do with my skill set? And I pivoted into the service side. Now I actually got another job while I started to build up my freelance consult business. And that was really the start of my agency. I went really general e-commerce, saw that there was a huge need for Amazon. I said, I'm going to hone in and focus on Amazon because everyone that I talked to said, you need to find a niche. You need to get specific. Don't go so broad. And so I went hard into Amazon. And I liked it a lot. One of the things that had just come out as my e-commerce business was on the tail end was the advertising piece. And I can go and look at my account and see the campaigns that I run. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I had no idea what I was doing, but it was so new. But there was a lot of stuff that I learned that helped me later on in helping other brands to grow in an agency. And really I've never run or grown an agency before. And so the past 6 years, and really I'd say 3, have been about creating the right systems so that we know as a team, can we effectively not just manage a brand, but help them to grow? Because I feel like you could have a management company that's just managing your brand and it's going along, but actually growing and being prepared for that growth is something totally different.
I'd love to touch on that, like growth. So obviously we're going to be looking at this through the lens of profits and we'll eventually get into that piece. But how do you grow, like on e-com in general? Basic principles, top line view. What does growth look like on e-com or Amazon?
It comes down to visibility. How visible are you in front of people? And that's the front end of things. Maybe the tip of the spear is getting in front of people. And the rest of it, the part that actually sells is, are you presenting things in the right way that help, I think, get people past objections, especially if we're talking about a product. What objections might someone have to purchasing this product alongside of, do they even know why they need this? You have a spatula that you're selling to someone. Is your product that unique? If it's a commodity, people might buy it based on price, and you go on to the next one. I feel like it could be hard to build a successful business or even brand, I think more importantly, around a commodity. But if you can show why this thing alleviates an issue that someone actually has and helps them get past objections they might have about, I don't want to buy this because of this. Oh, we're going to beat you to the punch. We already know that you're going to say this about this. If you can then show people, properly showcase, and do it quickly, especially on Amazon in the past 2 years or so, people are shopping super quickly. So we have to get to those selling points and objections as quickly as possible so that people don't go back to the page. So it's visibility, and then it's just having the right, I call it having good real estate. Do your photos on your house, on your listing, are you properly staging it? Does it look good? Do people want to buy it? Can they see themselves there? And then there's piece optimization and analysis of metrics after that. But yeah, it's visibility and then just having the right presentation of what you're selling to people.
Yeah, I love that. So when we're talking visibility, I would 100% agree with that. But maybe you can touch on, a lot of people say, okay, great, I need this. How? Like, how do you get the eyeballs on your products? How do you get that visibility? Especially in the beginning when I'm sure it's very limited.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple ways that you could go about it. And I think it's important to differentiate between a lot of older school advertising. By old school, I mean like 70s, 80s, 90s. It was what we would call over the top type advertising now. It's newspapers and TV commercials and all of those things that were just in your face in front of people. And it was flooding the market, buying space so that you would get in people's minds, and then they would go out and hopefully make a purchase decision based on that. But with the advent of the internet, I think Al Gore was the one who invented the internet. At least that's what he says. So thanks, Al. And as that came around, you're able to be a lot more targeted, and it's important to differentiate between that display and like ubiquity of just getting in front of people versus search advertising. And that's what most of the opportunity is for most brands in the beginning on Amazon, is with search. And so it starts with, before you even get to the advertising piece, it's again getting clear on what does your product actually do and where is it relevant. I had a great example said to me several years ago about someone who sells whiskey stones, those rocks that you keep in your freezer, supposed to keep your whiskey cold without diluting it. You would think that the target audience for that is a whiskey drinker. That's actually not the case. And the reason is, you have to know someone who drinks bourbon or who drinks whiskey, how do they actually like to drink it? A lot of times they want to drink it with an ice cube that's going to dilute it because it can help open up the flavor profile, but it also makes it more palatable. It's not as hot or spicy right away when you drink it, and the coolness of it, but also the dilution can change the flavor profile. And some people actually want it neat. They don't want to drink it with ice because they appreciate the flavor profile that's there. So who's the whiskey stone product for? It's for people who know people who drink whiskey. So is it really that great of a product? I don't think so. But if you know who your target audience is, it's great as a gift for your friend that drinks bourbon or drinks whiskey. Whether they use it or not is a different story. But if you're clear on who you're actually going after, and you know that from not just a product standpoint, but what's the story of my brand? I don't think your brand has to be high tech to solve a problem for someone. It could be simplifying something like a cord organizer. How does this help me? Like, I've got cords everywhere and I just think it looks ugly. I want it to look better. Okay, I want something that's going to put everything in one place and it's going to help make it look more uniform, and I'm going to have a neater, cleaner workspace. That's super high tech or even innovative, I would say, but it solves that organization problem. So if you're clear on that from the get-go, it makes your advertising, your foray into advertising, a lot easier, because now you can say, okay, what kind of just very basic initial keywords am I going to go after in search results? And then from there, you can say, okay, what other product detail pages do I want to show up on? If I'm a deodorant company and my product's $15, is Dove or Secret, are those really my competitors? No, those people are more than likely buying that product because of price and it fits like what a normal deodorant is for them. But someone that's spending $15 on a stick of deodorant, and they're likely looking for it because it's got the right amount of ingredients, it's sustainable packaging, there's all these things that make it more expensive, that make people want to purchase that product, then, okay, who should I actually be going after? And you have a lot less wasted spend, which is a term I don't like using a lot, because what wasted spend is, I think a lot of people will classify it as just spend that doesn't get a return. But you don't always know what you're going to get a return on. So if you spend and you say, we think this, we're going to make an educated guess here, and it doesn't work, now you can move on to the next target. So it's getting clear on what you actually provide and who you're going after. And then it's placing your targets based off that. And then honestly, overall strategy is not that crazy difficult. I feel like people want you to have the secret sauce, but if you can pump some budget into the targets that you have and validate whether those are going to be successful or not, it's a controlled experiment. It's saying, we think this is going to work. Let's test it. If it works, let's push more. If it's not, let's pull back and determine where to go to.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. As somebody who's deep in the weeds on the ads side, for sure, that's what I see. A lot of ways testing. Now, I think the benefit of someone like your team or someone like ours who has seen a lot of what works, what doesn't, we bring that learning into a new account. We might just know where, I call it like taking safer bets or taking more risky bets. We might have a better idea of what the safe bets might be for your product. But at the end of the day, we're also just identifying what we think will work best. And then we're pushing that out and then getting the data back and saying, okay, we definitely know this does or doesn't work for the product. So when we're talking, it sounds like we're more in the Amazon ecosystem, but just ads in general. And we're talking search ads. A lot of times those are pay-per-click. There's also search ads on Google, pay-per-click there as well. So when we're talking that, there's obviously a cost associated with that, right? Like you got to pay to run ads on people's platforms. So how should you start thinking about the cost of visibility? If visibility is how we really grow a brand, how, I guess, do you determine what those costs are, or is it just setting a target in the beginning?
I think how we as an agency approached it 3-4 years ago is a lot different than how we're approaching it now. And one of the things that has been helpful, I believe, in the sales process and going out and prospecting and acquiring new clients is being able to give people a vision for this, how successful this could or could not be. Sometimes those forecasts are better at helping me identify, and by forecast, I mean, we put together a chart and a statistically backed model of what your sales and your time to profitability would look like. And we're working on developing something that takes more factors into consideration, because the more inputs you have, I think the complicated it gets, but the more realistic it'll look like, instead of just guessing, oh, I think we can grow this 20%, I think we can grow it 50%, whatever. But when we put together time to profitability report, that actually helps us to determine who's not a good fit, I think, better than it is even who is a good fit. So what I mean by that is, when the pandemic hit, everybody wanted to sell PPE, right? Everyone was going after selling masks and selling all kinds of stuff. And I had a lead that was sent my way, and these two guys had a mask. They were actually in my city, and they're like, we've got this great mask. We're going to start selling to hospital systems, but there's nothing like it on the market, yada. And they said, but we want to go, we're ready to sell this on Amazon. I said, cool. They're like, how much do we need? What's costs look like? And I think everyone's excited to get sales, but it's always a longer road than you think, because there's already a lot of products out in the market. Is your product really truly innovative? Does it cut through the mess? And even if it is innovative, do people understand the technology and why they should choose this? The masks that have the little like breathing holes, as opposed to just a regular standard like surgical grade mask. I don't know that there's efficacy behind using those, but does someone know why they should use that as opposed to just a general mask, and why they'd pay maybe double or triple the cost for that? Anyway, we put together a time to profitability report for these guys, and they weren't going to get profitable until 9 months, 12 months later. And it was going to cost them like $1 million to do $1.5 million in sales. And it was just crickets, like nothing. And I just, hey, just you following up on this? Yeah, okay, I think we're just going to stick to this other model. But it was great, because had we gone in and started plowing in, I think we would have ultimately ended in a bad place, because they would have been disappointed. And we would be disappointed because we invested time in something that wasn't going to work. And maybe they pull out 3 months, 4 months in, even though we have a longer contract to work with. I'm not going after someone and suing them because they're getting out of a contract. It's too much money. It's too much worry. So I try to pick the prospects better. But those projections, giving people a vision, I guess is what I'm saying. Giving people a vision for what they can expect is really important. And part of it is just framing how you go about getting visibility and where profitability plays into that. Most of the brands that we're working with, I don't think this is crazy news, but it might be to some people. Most of the brands we're working with in at least the first 3 to 6 months are not profitable on Amazon. I think that's a lot of businesses too. Even a restaurant that is trying to get more people in the door and get people to come back and get their name out there. If you want to provide a really high level of service, you got to pay for those people, for the quality of food. And so you're not making money right away until you get the volume that you need. And that's really how brands are able to get seen on Amazon specifically. And what's so unique about that marketplace, which I know you know, is you're not just vying for placement in paid spots. You're hoping to increase sales velocity on your listing so that Amazon now sees it as more relevant to show it higher in search. Again, it's not rocket science, but you have to know going into it, hey, we work with several beauty brands, and there are lots of some metrics that people like to go and target. I'm not a big fan of I like to look more at ROAS, but it's just the inverse of ACOS. I might just be ACOS averse. I don't know. But when we're working with a beauty brand, you're in a super competitive space. For the first 6 months, we may target a 0.5. So that means every dollar you're spending, you're only getting 50 cents back, which seems crazy. But you're also going up against big players that have tons of attribution on those keywords that you have to prove to Amazon that your product is even worth putting in those spots, both on paid placements, but organically too. And so we're trying to create the momentum we need to get there, but it takes time to get there. And so we brace people like I wouldn't expect to see all the estimates we do on a projection. We're estimating a really low return. So if it does turn out better, great. But if it doesn't turn out better, we've already prepared for that. We know, and we can give someone like, hey, it's going to take you 6 months to get profitable, and it's going to be $35,000 out of pocket. So that's what it's going to cost you beyond what sales you're going to have. I think it's just giving people a vision is important. But the profitability is something that's important, but people want to grow and have a ton of profitability right away. And it becomes less and less possible because of how competitive it is and how much momentum you need to build. And if you're not able to build that momentum, you have to be willing to curb your expectations on sales and say, okay, we're okay with getting 75% less sales, but we're going to have some profitability. And so we don't have to sink a bunch of money into it.
Yeah, I love that you're so transparent with brands because I think where I see I think where I see a lot of the strongest losses, going back to we were saying like unproductive ad spend or wasted ad spend, like I too have an issue with the verbiage, I guess you would say.
If
But
you
the
spend
thing
money
that
on something you know doesn't work, sure, it's wasted.
right. But what I will say you can lump in as wasted ad spend would be if you ran like those aggressive ads and then you realized about halfway through before you've actually seen that return in the organic rank, crap, I can't afford this.
Yeah.
And so you just stop those ads. Then in some ways you did waste that ad spend because you didn't actually see what you were trying to get as long-term benefits. You ran it enough to lose the money. You did get the data, but you can't actually use the data because you're not going to continue to run it anymore. And so I think that's where a lot of brands, if they don't go into it eyes wide open on the profitability level, and larger brands, that's a whole nother story. If you're off and rolling and you have ranking and you're still losing out, then yeah, that's a whole nother discussion. What you're talking about is launching brands on the platform. And hey, any business, regardless if you're talking e-com, if you're talking retail, brick and mortar, you're going to have some sort of upfront cost. And some of that is going to be getting visibility, like even paying more when you're talking retail for a location that's going to bring you more foot traffic. You're technically paying for that visibility and the increase in maybe your rental fees. So at some level,
cost of your goods, that's a sunk cost that you have to be prepared for. We even base our pricing model based off of what we know people's costs are going to be in the beginning. And what I mean by that is we don't charge a super high flat rate, although I think our quality of services are worth that. We do a mixed model of a retainer plus a percent of sales because we know that they're going to have to spend money on ads to sell the product. And as soon as we've created demand with sales, we have to follow that up with more product. I feel like we were talking about human nature before this, but there's a human nature component of the shiny object or what's the get rich quick thing. And I think get rich quick schemes work because people want to get rich quick. If I could get rich quick, would I go for it? And it was a sure thing. Yeah, why not? Why wouldn't I want to get more money quickly and invest little and get a big return? That's just not, in my experience as an entrepreneur and with all the other entrepreneurs that I know, that's not typically how it works. But when you're able to, in the sales process, or hopefully not once they're a client, but in that prospecting process, if you can understand where someone's coming from, what their expectations are, if you can either help set the proper expectations and they're malleable to that, then I think that they could be the right person to get up on Amazon. Because I think every brand should be on Amazon. Whether you're prepared to do that or not is a totally different story. But if I can understand where your head's at in getting on Amazon and what you're expecting and what you're willing to make adjustments on, that tells me your level of preparedness. And so a quick example of that is someone who had a product and I always ask, what are your expectations of sales? What would success look like for you on Amazon? We want to do, $1 million or $2 million within the next year or two. I said, okay, cool. What are you prepared to spend on advertising? That's how you get visible. I don't know. We were going to get the products up, but we were probably going to spend $500,000. Sorry, I couldn't even get that out. And I was like, okay. And I just was straight up. I was like, your expectations for what you're going to get for that cost are not aligned. You either need to say, okay, we're willing to only get a couple $1,000s in sales, or be willing to put forward. And I'm like, I'm really just throwing a number out there because I don't know what the exact amount is. But if you want to get $1 million in sales, can you spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a month in ads to start building that steam? And I think you look at it from a projection standpoint, if we get a 1-to-1 return on ads, let's say that's like it's not really break even, but let's say that's like best case scenario, or even I guess worst case scenario, but let's say you do get a 1-to-1 return on your ads. You spend 20 grand, you get another 20 grand back. So it's technically 40. Oh no, I'm sorry. Technically it's 20 that you get back. And let's say you're able to, which is overestimating, but let's say we're able to get 50% of right from the get-go of your sales from organic sales. You're getting another 20. That's 40 grand. 40 grand times 12. That's not $1 million. And I just said it's not $1 million because I didn't want to do quick math in my head. That's just really quick estimate off the bat. I think you could get more, but you have to be prepared going into it, I think, to sacrifice and get less of a return. So it's those kinds of conversations that help me to understand where are you at and are you ready, prepared to be on Amazon. And some people say, we know it's going to cost, we know it's going to be expensive, but we believe in being on the channel. That's more important to me than most things because I know they're going to be a good partner too. And they're going to be able to endure some of the hardships of, oh, okay, we're not seeing quite the return. We have someone that's copying our product. We have someone that is starting to be really aggressive on ads towards us. And so we're having to compensate for that. There's a lot of curveballs that will get thrown at you. It's typically longer and more expensive to get up and running.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I know we've been talking about like expectations. It's almost like profits. Don't expect them in the beginning, which again, I would agree with. And if you're going to get into business, again, you should. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people have been sold the Amazon dream of put your product up and like you're just going to get rolling in it from day
Yeah.
one. And
Elizabeth, I
Amazon,
put my product up and no one's buying it. Why is that?
I don't know, maybe run some ads, but they all see it. They don't always treat it like a business. And when talking business, again, you said in the beginning, it's not sexy. Profit and loss statements. It's important. It's important. I always say it's important to know your numbers. My perspective has always been it's the truth. Like the numbers tell the truth. And the truth is there regardless if you want to look at it or not. So you might as well just look at it and understand what actually is going on. So that being said, how important do you think it is to start calculating profits? And like when do you start doing that?
I think you should be tracking all that stuff from the very beginning. I don't know why you wouldn't unless you're wanting, to your point, bury your head in the sand and not see what the reality is. So again, put together some kind of rough projection or get with someone to help put together a rough projection of what you could do, but measure it all along and realize, okay, what has our investment been? How well are we doing? And a big part of it is people don't really know all their costs. You start to look at, and I did this early on in business. I just priced stuff at 3 times whatever my cost was. And I thought, I'm good to go. But you have to pay for shipping. You have to pay for storage fees. You have to pay for a referral fee. Or if you're selling on your own site, a credit card percentage. Like there's all these fees that start to add up. You also want to pay yourself. You want to have some profit left over. So if you don't know and you're not clear on what your costs even are, you can't track it. And 2, if you don't know what you want to get from a profit standpoint, or maybe even look at what's industry standard. If you're in a grocery store, your profit margins are 1%, maybe 2%. So if you go into having your own grocery store and you're expecting to get 15% profit, you're way off the mark. But if you're selling a good that's not a commodity and that's at a super premium, and let's say you're in high fashion, your thread or your materials don't necessarily cost more. It's the design and the name that you put on it that makes people want to purchase it. And so your profit margin can go way up. If you know that going in, everything's so category dependent. People say, what's a good ad spend? And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. It depends upon your category and what do your profit margins looks like and what are your costs. And so I think track it right from the get-go so that you at least know and you can be more prepared. And maybe it hurts to see that you're losing money on something. At least you know what your costs are and you can be more informed and make better decisions based off that, instead of, hey, let's sink another 50 grand in ads. You can say, hey, we spent a lot of money here and it hasn't really worked. Let's maybe adjust how we're doing stuff so that we can try and get to profitability quicker. Maybe we don't we spent money on ads and we haven't seen quite the return. Let's try and get closer to profitability or at least break even quicker, so we're not hemorrhaging money and we just change. If you don't know your numbers, you don't really know what direction to adjust to.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Track from day one. I've been surprised at how many conversations I have. A lot of people will look at total A costs as like blended, for those of you listening, not in the Amazon world or even not sure what total A cost is. Ad spend divided by total sales, which gives you like percentage of your total sales that you had to spend on ads to achieve those sales. So a lot of people will look at that and gauge profitability by that. But a lot of people are playing very fast and loose with what their profit margins actually are. And then, as you said, not factoring in all of the costs. So we see what like the cost of goods are and what shipping is. We'll get those profit margins from the clients, but we don't know their background on their operation costs, what they're paying their team, what kind of software they're using, all of that being factored in oftentimes can be overlooked. And that's not something that I feel like I need to know about everybody's business. It's fine, run it how you need, but you at least getting very clear on what your profits are for your business before you take in all those additional fees is probably a good idea. Can I even sustain this? Because where people get into really big trouble, and we actually had that with a very large client. They seemed to be going along. Sales were amazing. They were selling in all these different marketplaces, and they ended up going bankrupt because they weren't keeping on track of their costs.
I think that having more money doesn't necessarily make you more successful. It means you have more means, but I think you also have more opportunity to mess things up, to screw the pooch on something because you have a lot of money and you can go really hard on something that maybe normally you'd have to be a little bit more conservative on, especially if it's not your money, if it's like an investor's money and you're not super focused on how you're spending that money, then yeah, it could go haywire. But having more money doesn't mean, we've seen that in our Amazon industry alone. Big businesses that had a lot of money or had high sales and just were not profitable or couldn't prove their model, even if they had investors. And so they've gone belly up. It's not a guaranteed path to success. I'm the kind of person where I could just set out on a journey and be like, I'll figure it out as I go. And I might get hurt a lot more and get injured a lot more than I expected. But I think I'm with that. But still, if I'd done some planning beforehand and known I'm going to come across some lions, and so I'm going to need to have some kind of protection to, I guess I'm going on some kind of epic journey here, but I need to have some kind of protection.
Going into metaphors.
Yeah, to get through this, I'm more prepared to, like, why wouldn't you want to know a little bit of what's coming ahead? But if you just plow through stuff and just say, okay, we're just going to go. I like to fly by the seat of my pants, but at the same time, I've learned that you have to be a little bit more prepared and
Yeah.
otherwise you kind of screw yourself.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's where, again, a lot of people get into trouble, not just calculating profits. Again, regardless of what those turn out to be, just do it. Just look at your numbers. And so, do you have any tools that you find are really helpful for sellers when it comes to calculating profit?
My favorite tool is the calculator. It really efficiently gives you the numbers. I think you could just get stuff on a spreadsheet. I like things to be visually appealing, but one of the things that we've learned, especially when growing brands or launching them, what is ideal, getting the best media assets and a video and getting reviews and getting the A+ content up and just having the perfect page before we really lean in to growing that product. That might be ideal, but not everyone has that kind of time, nor do they want to wait that long. And so I've really been focusing on, and even just internally when we build a system for a process for something, my review system for or goal setting for people, it's all stuff on a spreadsheet. It has our Cartology text and fonts and color scheme and all that kind of stuff on it, but it's pretty basic and it just goes through, it has some kind of structure so that people have something that they can put down and then they can reference, but it's an MVP of sorts. It's a minimum viable product. So if we can put forward something that will work for the time being and we can refine it over time, we end up getting going. And then I think we're actually able to refine it better than creating the most perfect system. And by that time, when you start to implement it, it might be outdated or you may have missed out on opportunities because you didn't get something up and running. So having that MVP, I think, has been super helpful. So just getting something on a spreadsheet and saying, what are actually all my costs? A lot of people will say, okay, advertising is going to be 15 to 25% of my product. And I don't like to look at it at that because sure, it might vary in that range, but as in the very beginning, your advertising costs could be way more. It could be 50%. In beauty, it could be 100%. Like you have to invest to grow. So I think it's about looking about total cash and saying, how much can we invest upfront and not make money? And then look at, okay, when we're in maintenance mode, yeah, maybe it's going to be 10 to 15% of our total sales, but totally looking at everything from a fixed cost, but just put in a spreadsheet and actually know what all your costs are. And then have an accountant or a bookkeeper that really knows what they're doing, audit your books or do it on a regular basis and say, here's what your actual cash flow is. And you can pair that up with what you put together and say, okay, those two things line up, or hey, something doesn't line up when your books are getting reconciled. What's the cost that I've not looked into? And then you actually can see what is going to come in and then you can better forecast for the future. But I don't have like a special tool. Just put in a spreadsheet or get it down somewhere and calculate it. I think that's probably your best bet.
Yeah. And I think just even going through your costs and writing them down is probably better than the person said, I think last year I calculated we were about 25%.
Yeah, no, go and look at it because your memory will not necessarily serve you well.
Yeah. So we're talking about obviously growth through the lens of profit. And we've done a lot of, okay, so you need to know your profits. A lot of sellers are here. You're talking about in the beginning, like we're in business to be able to take care of our families, to be able to grow. And so how do brands find that balance of, yes, we need to keep an eye on profits. We don't want to be blind to it, but then we also would like to grow ourselves and our businesses.
I pull that back from like a lens of life, and I don't know that I believe that balance is the goal that should be achieved. I look at it more from a seasons standpoint. So there's going to be a season in the beginning where you're having to work more hours, you're having to invest more time to get things up and running so that you have more of a fine-tuned machine 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the road. When you're looking at your business, looking at seasons of, okay, we're going to be, I think instead of balance, it's knowing what your trade-offs are. We're going to really be growing now. We're not going to be profitable, and that's okay. When people say we want growth and profit at the same time, what they're saying is we don't want to be successful, or we're not willing to put the cost in to grow, because we want to grow, but really what we want is profitability. And what someone says they want might be very different from what action they take. So knowing the seasons that your business is in, and hey, this next year, probably not going to see my family a ton because I'm going to have to be investing a lot of time, and I'm a two-man show, two-woman show, whatever. I have to use myself and this other person to really do most of the jobs. And over time, we want to be able to hire as we have more money in the bank, but it's not going to happen right away. So I think if you adjust expectations for the season that you're in, and then also as you grow, I think that will help. But also as you grow and as you mature in your business, knowing if you're just chasing growth, why are you chasing that growth? If you're set on having a $10 million business and you know that that's your goal, at least you're focused on achieving that. But if you're just saying, let's hit 10 million and you don't know why, you're chasing something that maybe doesn't exist or isn't right for you. There's a business owner I know who owns a food CPG company. For me, it's about having a 4-day work week. And I don't care about having the biggest or even having the most sales, but how can I be profitable and how can I have a 4-day work week so I can spend more time with my kids? I think he's going to end up being more successful in what he's trying to achieve because he at least knows what he's going for. And then when he hits that, he'll be like, great, this is exactly what I wanted. Whereas if you just put a sales or even a profit number, you don't know why you're chasing that, you're probably not going to be satisfied. So just knowing what season you're in and being okay with that, I think that's how you find joy in the work that you're doing. Because sometimes it's just going to suck. It's going to be tough. I'm dealing with growing pains in my business right now. Some of it sucks and sometimes it's hard to manage, but it's a necessary part of dealing with it, just being in the muck and the mire, but having to be okay and realize, okay, it's a season.
Yeah, I love it. So for those listening in, it's like, great, I would love to get in touch with you. I'd love to learn more about cartology, maybe talk about working with you. Where can people find you?
So I think if you want to look into cartology more, you can just go to our website, thinkcartology.com. A lot of people think our name is Think Cartology, but cartology.com is just not available. If anyone knows who's selling that and wants to sell it for a good cost, let me know. But you can go to thinkcartology.com, and that first page really talks a lot about who it is that we serve, and you can determine if that's who you are. It gives you some examples of work, but helps frame and put Amazon in perspective, because a lot of people think either I don't need to be on there or, oh yeah, we can tackle this on our own. And both of those things are often not true. You do need to be on there and you need some kind of partner, even if it's not me. If you wanted to see more of some of the stuff that I talk about, content that I put out, follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn, Michael Maher. And I talk about a couple of things. I try and stay in my lane, but talk about Amazon and then talk about entrepreneurship, and faith is a big part of that, I think, for me. So those are the things that I talk about. And I also have a podcast called The Long Game, if you want to check that out.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll make sure that we link all that stuff in the description. And it has been an absolute pleasure. And thanks so much for being on.
If you're ready to get serious about your e-com business, you've found your new home. See you next time on Action Insights.